Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Model Railroading Live, MRL. It is May 4th, 2022. And you probably heard this all day today, but I'm not even going to say it. I'm not. Don't force me. I'm not going to say it. Not going to say it. But anyway, it's May 4th, 2022. We have an exciting show for you tonight. But before we do that, I have a few announcements to make, and these are kind of serious and everything. So I want you guys to pay close attention, okay? First of all, welcome John Bannicki, Wig Wag Workshops, Grandpa Rails again, and Randall Ellis is in the house. Hello, Randall. How are you guys doing tonight? I hope you're well. Everything is going good. Weather's starting to change, get a little warmer. Hey Johnny, hey Big Bill, Grandpa Rail says. Anyway, so this is what's going on with Model Railroading Live. As you know, Model Railroading Live always tries to produce the best content that we can do, and doing so for you guys and the community out there, because that's what we like doing. We're model railroaders just like you guys, so we enjoy doing this and finding the people to come on the show, whether we're interviewing or showing off a few things. Anyway, we have this new thing going on Discord. We got away from Whereby, and we're now doing Discord. That's where Discord, Discord. That's where you guys can come in. And it's an after shop. They usually get on about 10 o'clock at night. There you go, to Discord chat. And if you go to general on the side, you have to register the whole 9 yards. But once you're in, it's pretty cool. Other model railroaders are in there. And it's kind of like an after hours joint, if you will, for model railroaders. So if you want, please join us on Discord. I'd really, it's for you guys as well. It's, there's a set of rules, obviously, no cursing, no alcoholic beverages. If you do, put it in a covered glass so that we don't see it, or, stuff like that. But you guys know that. We're all adults here. So tomorrow night, May 5th, Johnny's Train Talk Show will be back on air at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And once again, you guys can be a participant in that show. If you have a webcam and a good internet, you guys can be a part of that show. And it's always fun to be on that show. Hey, John Arthur's in the house. Hello, John. We're just talking about Johnny's Train Talk Show. Will be on tomorrow night at 9 p.m. And you guys can be a part of that. And this show tonight is not Who's Big Bill Talking To. This show is an independent show, content produced and derived from Mike Dettinger that we had on Who's Big Bill Talking To 2 weeks ago. So this is a show that he's come up with, and it's going to be a 4-part series. And we're going to premiere tonight's show. It's called Bursting the Plastic Bubble. It's basically the glue fingerprint and John Allen, or how weathering saved my model. That's tonight, and we'll get there momentarily, but please bear with me as I do homework here. Who's Big Bill Talking To will be back on May 18th. That guest will be Jimmy K. James K. He's the gentleman that was featured in Bill Baronic's The N Scale Railroad, the former Verizon. Remember the wiring? He was a former Verizon installer. So his expertise on that, plus it's an N scale layout that's pretty good, pretty much finished. And he's going to be he is going to be on the 18th, May 18th, to be exact, at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, I'm saying about time, what came across the MRL news desk today was something I'd like to share. It has to do with railroads. And it says here, and this is all about time. It says here, dated today, May 4th, 2022 at 12:10 p.m. This came into the MRL news desk. It says, we can thank the railroad industry for standardizing our time zones. Until the 19th century, towns, villages synchronized their clocks to a local solar noon. This created thousands of local times that all varied and made scheduling transportation a major headache. Train schedules in different cities had to list dozens of arrivals and departure times for each train to account for all the mini time zones, right? But on November 18th, 1883, railroad companies in the United States and Canada began using a system very similar to the standard time zones we still use today and in the UK. The railroad companies began using standardized based time in 1840. And now you know, right? There you go. And now you know. So, with that said, what was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about? Oh, I'm going to start something different at the end of the show. Anyway, well, what's this John Arthur? Is the Hula Girl new? I don't recall seeing that before. What Hula Girl? I don't see no Hula Girl. All right. If you say there's a Hula Girl, John, I guess there must be a Hula Girl. Anyway. Oh, well, there we go. Anyway, without further ado, let me bring on the guest tonight who will be doing this show and doing this content. It's a new series. It's called Bursting the Plastic Bubble. The Glue, tonight's the first show, The Glue Fingerprint and John Allen, or How Weathering Saved My Model. And we're going to start off, the premieres tonight, and then in September, we're going to start it up again, along with Mr. Baronic on what is the track planner working on. So without further ado, let's bring in Mike Dettinger. Michael.
Hey, Big Bill, how you doing today?
I'm well, Mike. I'm well.
Good to hear it, my friend. Good to hear
it. I woke up this morning, so that's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. You know? Now, here's a fun fact for you, Big Bill. I bet you didn't know this.
What's that?
That China is as big as the U.S. in terms of girth. So the U.S. has 4 time zones. You know, you have the mountain and your central and your Pacific and Eastern, right?
I didn't know that.
But China's the same girth, except China only has 1 time zone for an area that big. So
really?
They could, in theory, have 4 time zones. They have only 1.
Really?
That's something to think about.
You know, here's something else before we get on. Did you know that Al Capone, the gangster, is responsible for us having expiration dates on milk?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, there you go. You live longer, you learn some more.
That's it.
Yeah, I believe his mother and his daughter got sick
from
expired milk because they didn't have any expiration dates on milk. And they, he forced the companies to put expiration dates on milk.
He made an offer they couldn't refuse.
Basically, that's where it is. Dwight at Northern Star's in the house. Hey, Dwight, Adam Cruz is in the house. Hey, guys, how are you? Welcome. So, Mike, we the last time we spoke in regards to this new show, Bursting the Plastic Bubble. And we had some really good feedback on it, and people were excited about it going on. So explain how, when, and what, and why, and the whole 9 yards. And let's get started. I'm going to be the traffic cop tonight, so I'll be doing the moderating on the questions. So I might interrupt you here and there and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm sure. Definitely, dude. Please interrupt away. Ask questions. I do want to make this as interactive as possible.
Right. Just before we start, though, somebody in the audience said that there was a hula girl on the screen. Do you see a hula girl?
No, I just see a Godzilla.
Yeah, there's a Godzilla. Okay, I was just checking. John, I don't know. Okay, whatever.
Now, if there was an anime girl, I probably would see it. But that's just
I ain't.
Well, anyway, tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo. So we can celebrate Cinco de Mayo. We're not going to talk about the holiday today, though.
No. I have to say it. May the fourth be with you. I'm
The
sorry, I had to say it.
the fourth be with you. Yep. Well, I was going to say, at least tomorrow we get tacos and tequila. So
Okay.
that's a step up.
I guess. I don't. Yeah, it is.
Well, before we get into it, too, I just wanted to kind of show a quick video just to piggyback on some of the TTrack topic that we had during our last discussion, because I think it's kind of germane, because the whole idea of bursting the plastic bubble is a whole idea. It's a journey of discovery. It's trying new things and everything else. And it's an interesting little video. It's going to be about like 2 minutes. So I'll get Johnny to cue that up for us if he can. And essentially what it is I negotiated with my wife to get my layout on the dining room table for 2 weeks, which is very, very interesting. And what I'm showing here is how easy it is to just replace a module in the TTrack situation. Basically, I use a big screwdriver just to separate the modules. One module came out, another module came in. Of course, I pre-leveled this a little bit too, so it goes a little bit quicker. But essentially, that's how easy it is to change out a module in the TTrack situation. And in a matter of minutes, literally minutes, trains are back running. So it's just a fascinating concept too. So I did want to start out by sharing that little piece with us.
Now this is on a dining room table. Is that correct?
This is my dining room table. I negotiated a 2-week deal, a 2-week engagement to have my TTrack modules on the dining room table with my wife. And that's just a testament to the portability of TTrack. And of course, when I was there, I was using time to film all sorts of videos and such.
Right.
But just simply the ability to change out modules. I know we talked earlier about the Bath and Hammondsport Railroad and how over time the railroad changed. And in fact, I think a couple months ago, RMC had a article on changing out buildings to change time frames. With the Bath and Hammondsport, during the years, like in the early turns of the 1900s, they had most of the track work was concentrated around Hammondsport near Lake Keuka. And during the 1940s and 50s, most of the track work moved inland, and the track work that was at Lake Keuka was pulled up. And essentially, with a system like TTrack, you have the ability to model something like that, because you can build 2 modules of the same place. You can build Hammondsport in 1908,
right,
and Hammondsport in 1950.
Right.
And depending on what area you're running, what trains, you could just change out a whole module. It just gives you that level of flexibility. And I just think that's just a fascinating concept that you can do, where you're not just changing like one item, or you're not just changing the rolling stock. You're actually changing the whole railroad to better show off your concept.
Right.
So
Now,
I think that's a fascinating area that probably needs to be explored a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. John Benek says, nice TTrack.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I do. Everybody loves TTrack. And the funny thing is, I talk about the demographic of a TTrack club versus the demographic of like any other regular modular group.
Right.
And for a regular modular group, the demographic skews heavily male. It really does. But in a TTrack club, it really skews about 50-50. It's a lower entry. There's hardly any barriers to get involved. You basically get a module. You can do anything you want with it. And more women are aren't locked into modeling the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1956. It's like you can do
Right,
whatever you
right.
want. You can have a windmill, you can have a fairy castle, you can do whatever
Yeah,
within
right,
reason.
right.
And that creativity it attracts women, and it's more of a social thing too, because now you don't have to do everything yourself. You only do a piece of it, and you bring it together. It's like a potluck dinner.
Right, right, right,
Everybody goes, they bring something, and
right.
you usually have a good meal at the end of the day. It might not be what you're expecting. It's definitely not lobster tail and filet mignon, but it's
Right,
pretty
right.
good most times.
But you know, and I know, there's always that one person that's got to bring, everybody else is bringing the Bud Light, and he shows up with the Heineken.
That's right. Well, that's it. But
And
he's
then you show
exclusive.
up.
He shows up with like 6 of them. He drinks 5 of them.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
all right, Bill, you and the rest of the guys share that one.
Yeah, exactly. You guys can have the Coors Light. We're gonna
Yeah.
take in the good stuff here, but yeah, no, you're right. Does it matter? Does it matter on the size of each TTrack? Does it matter in the size? Does it have to be a 1x or a 4x4 or?
Well, in terms of it depends on your situation, what you want to do. Now, for interchange, there are standard size for modules. Now, the 1 square foot is the standard single, what they call standard single. You can build doubles, which are double wide, triples, and then quads. And then, quads just a little bit over 4 feet wide. And once you get past 4 feet, it becomes cumbersome, and it just kind of defeats the whole purpose of TTrack being like really light and really portable. That's the whole idea. You want to just do something light and portable. And you could in theory, if you wanted to build a home layout, you could build an 8-foot section if you really wanted to. It's
Yeah.
But for interchange purposes, because typically most TTrack clubs will set up a continuous run. There's no reason why you have to do it that way. It's just that when you go to a train show, there's more of an emphasis on having the train run and people seeing the train, because you can have the most beautiful scenery there, and people come over to look at it for maybe like a half a minute or something like that and move on. But if there's a train coming, that draws them in, and then they'll watch the train go around, and then they'll start looking at the scenery, and then they'll start looking for all the little details and stuff.
And with this show that we're kicking off tonight, Bursting the Plastic Bubble, what is it that we or you would hope to accomplish in doing, and such with this first show that we're going to be doing tonight?
I think what I really want to do tonight with this is kind of set up the framework. It's about my journey with model railroading. Okay, when I was a youngster, when I first started out, there was a very thin, narrow window of what a model railroader should be, what a model railroader empire should be. And that was my goal, just to go down that narrow path. And unfortunately, that didn't really work for me, because I didn't really get too far with it. I never really got past the plywood planes. I had track laid down, I had trains running, I had some level of scenery. Being a youngster, I was confined to the basement with the trains.
Yeah, sure.
So, in terms of the materials that you could use in the basement, you're kind of limited to plastic kits, because the basement's damp. It's not really temperature controlled.
Right.
So usually cardboard or wood wasn't really an option in terms of making structure kits for the model railroad. And then also you always had this model railroader coming in every month. That was kind of like my main access point to model railroad news and fellowship. Pages of model railroader kind of set the table for me, if you will. And a lot of those featured the basement empire, a nice organically grown benchwork, beautiful layouts, beautiful craftsmanship, like the Gory and Defeated, John Allen, Altours and Lone Pine, all those great stuff. And that kind of that kind of modeling takes a real commitment and discipline. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like I said, July 11th, 1956, Pennsylvania Railroad around Philadelphia.
Right.
That's it. And basically, if it wasn't in that area, you have to be disciplined not to buy different kinds of structures. You have to be disciplined not to buy different kinds of rolling stock. And unfortunately, I don't have that level of discipline. I'm just all over the board. So having an option like TTrack or micro layout or basically a smaller project with different focuses is a much better fit for the way I like to enjoy the hobby. And bursting the plastic bob, the bursting the plastic bubble is going to talk about my journey of going from that narrow uh, narrow focus of what a model railroader should be, as dictated and reinforced by what I read in like Model Railroader and some of the other magazines.
Right.
The Lionel showroom, for example, that was always a big thing. All these big train displays, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And if you have the discipline to do that, that's wonderful. But my journey had to go a different route. I could never get to that stage. It's just this frustration after a while. And I think we talked offline about how sometimes you get to the point where you don't even want to go down in the basement anymore. And
Yes.
that is really the worst, because this is something you enjoy.
Right.
This is something that you should be running down the stairs, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I feel like, looking at a K4 Pacific again, trying to
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So basically, what you're advocating, or what you're saying that is basically that has worked for you, is that you want diversity and some sort of different, approach to the hobby that will draw you in and keep you interested. Not saying that you can't have the 1956
mhm.
Pennsylvania, but also something else that's a little smaller that can help jog your creative juices, if you will.
Well, as somebody who likes to have their cake and eat it too,
Yes.
I want both.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to have some portion of the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1956,
Right.
but I also want other things as well.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's the key. And I think part of my journey too, and I hope it strikes a chord with people, people watching, that maybe I can think about something different. At least, you don't have to do it. I mean, I'm not advocating anything. In all honesty, I'm just talking about my journey. The one thing that I do know for a fact is my modeling skills have improved greatly when I started working with materials besides plastic and plastic building kits. When I started working with wood and plaster and cardboard, and the thing is, you don't have to put any of them away. You mix everything together. In a healthy model, you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, the best thing somebody could call me as a model railroader is say, "Oh, Mike, you're a jack of all trades." I'm like, thank you very much, because I do have my hand in a little bit. I know a little
Right.
bit about
Right.
everything.
Right.
And there's some things I do excel in, but the focus is that I'm willing to try and experiment. And the micro layouts and TTrack offer an outlet where you can explore different things in a safe environment. And if it doesn't work, you really haven't committed too much time to it. And if it does work, well, you just keep it going. You build another module to go with it. You build a partner module, and 2, 3, 4, and then pretty soon you have the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1956 or
1956.
whatever. You know what I mean? So that's
Right.
the whole thing.
Right.
You kind of trick yourself into building that empire.
Right. 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 And even if you don't have the room for it, at least you have the ability to take these apart and store them away, until you're ready to, as Grandpa Rail says, he likes the idea of the plug and play scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives, for you guys that are tuning in or have come in behind or during our conversation, tonight is the show is called Bursting the Plastic Bubble. I'm the moderator tonight, the traffic cop in the question in the Q&A, but Mike Dettinger here is the one hosting this show, and it's basically about a personal journey that he has taken with model railroading and looking at it differently with TTrack modulars and just exploring a different realm of model railroading. And for those in it, it's geared for all model railroaders, but for those that are in, that want to, don't have the room or armchair model railroaders, this is a show, Bursting the Plastic Bubble, that will hopefully help you get off your keister and start modeling. So
Mm-hmm.
for those that came in late, that's what we're doing here. And this is a premiere show, and we will be back in September with this and 3 other shows, hopefully more. Okay. I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, no, that's perfect. I mean, in all honesty, this is exactly the whole thing. I mean, the whole idea of bursting the plastic bubble is just getting past what you know, what you're comfortable with, what you think you're expected to do based on, what you've learned or picked up as you move along. One of the best teachers I had too was when I stopped staying in the basement by myself and got out to different train shows and met people at different train clubs and just getting more involved with people in the hobby. Um, I think at some point I had in my mind that, oh yeah, this is my little empire and I'm just going to do everything to it and everything I have to do. And people are just going to come and see it. And, the reality is I never really got past the plywood planes because it was just too daunting. It was too big. So, uh, you know, Joe Fugate he talks about the one module at a time philosophy. This is kind of the same idea to do it now. Kind of shifting gears a little bit and getting back onto the show's kind of intended topic, which is the glue fingerprint. I'm sure many of you have done plastic. In fact, I'm sure everyone's built a plastic model kit. Maybe like a couple hundred by now. And I remember when I first got a plastic model kit, and of course, I didn't use like a pin or a stick to do it. I just put the glue right out, the solving glue right out of the tube, just squeezed it right on there. And then, sure enough, as you're going along building the thing, putting it together, you end up with a glue fingerprint somewhere. And it was
Yes.
so frustrating, especially when you first start building and you have no real frame of reference, you have no support system, if you will. You don't have other people to tell you, all right, well, no, it's not that big a deal. We can deal with this. You're like, oh my God, what do I do? Oh, I have to get rid of this. Throw it away and I have to build a new one. And when you're a little kid and you're getting like what, $5 a week allowance and the model kits are like $4.25, it's like, well, do the math. You're really not going to build too much of an empire at that rate.
Exactly.
So, you get into a conundrum, if you will. It really is a conundrum that, what do I do? What do I do with this? I mean, I can't just constantly throw stuff away. Oh, I could try kit bashing it. All right. Well, that's fine until the piece you need from both of the kits that you're kit bashing have glue fingerprints on. Now what do you do?
Right.
Right. And then it's just the frustration. But then you enter in a guy like John Allen. And that's one of those things too, where it really pays to not just look at the pictures, but to read the articles and to kind of get a feeling for what John Allen's all about.
For some of our viewers out there that are new to model railroading, or could you explain who John Allen is and was?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, John Allen was a author, photographer, and a model railroader who lived in Monterey, California. and he passed away in the 1970s. So he was very early on. He was his photography work has been used in a number of advertisements from the period, with basically Barney, and there's actually several fan sites on there, and I know a lot of people who do a lot of work to try to keep that memory of his railroad, the gory and defeated, alive. And he basically introduced a slice of humor to model railroad, but he also did something up until that time that was very unique, because before John Allen really, um, you know, entered into on the model railroading scene and became, into the model railroading magazines and such, most people would just build a model like in a pristine condition. All right, it's like, all right, if you're building a model car, you definitely want it to be shiny and everything else. But if you're building a model train, it's like almost the exact opposite to that. You want it to be all grimy and graffiti covered and everything else. And that didn't happen until John Allen basically came on the scene. He was one of the first persons to experiment with weathering techniques and having the model tell more of a personal story. Like, for example, boarding up windows, or just covering it with grime, putting debris around the scene, that kind of thing.
Right.
And if you look at some of his work, I mean, by today's super fine scale standards, some of it's kind of old and simplistic, but it was very much, he was the pioneer that did it, and his work, is still incredible. It's still incredible. I mean, it might not, pass the museum quality scrutiny, but he would say something like, all right, you got a glue fingerprint on your model. What are you going to do about it? All right, can you cover it over with something? Can you put a board over the side of it? Can you put like a meter or something on it, or a mailbox? Maybe cut in another window. Do something with it to hide the fact. And if worst comes to worst, you can just make it, look like a patch. If it's like a stucco building, you just have it painted a different color. It's like, oh yeah, the stucco fell off in that section.
Right.
So essentially, you don't just say, hey, I didn't build this model perfect, but it's okay. I can still have a great model if I weather it.
Right.
And that's the whole key. Just getting it from that mindset to, oh, I have to build all my models perfect and pristine every time too. I don't have to do that. Now I can make my models tell a story. I can say, oh, well, yeah, why do you have all this bag of mail in front of your building? It's like, all right, well, the guy goes to the mail car and he steals a sack of mail every day or something like that. You can tell a little story about that.
Right.
Like you said, Bill, they'll see a scene, something will catch their imagination, and they'll ask you, well, what's the deal with that yellow and red building you have on your lap? Everything's all this certain color scheme, but there's this one building that's bright yellow and red. What's the deal with that?
Right.
And then you can say, oh, yeah, well, that building's the new shop. This guy came downtown. He wanted to revitalize, add a little bit of showmanship to it, what have you. I mean, that's and as you build these stories, your creativity flows, and it kind of re-energizes you too. It's like, oh, great.
It's unique to the hobby that you can do that, because I have the O'Shea's Junkyard here on my layout, and Don G of the Historical Model Railroad, that he does his HO scale. Me and him conspired to do this thing where Jack O'Shea's great grandson moves out to Nevada, and he's built, and he has the O'Shea's Junkyard out there, and there's like this whole entire story on the nearly historical railroad where he, comes from New York in the 60s, to start because he wanted to do and had all these other adventures and these other enterprises, but he wound up doing what he knew best, being the junk man and stuff. So, you create this storyline and then you'd be surprised when you tell this story how people are so like that really happened. They get enthralled with it. They get caught up in the moment of it. And,
it's historical fiction. It might
yeah,
not have happened exactly like it, but I'm sure something similar like it happened somewhere.
right.
Right? It's like that whole idea they had at one time. There was a whole proto freelance movement where it's like, all right, it's not a specific railroad, but it's similar to like Tony Keister and his Allegheny Midland, right, which is basically based on the nickel plate. So he used a lot of the nickel plate practices in the freeway. There was a big movement like that at one time,
Right.
And then basically they shifted gears and went more to straight up prototype. But
so, but going forward with this and the glue fingerprint from John Allen and how weathering saved it. I get a few comments here.
mm-hmm.
John Arthur says nowadays it looks weird when every model is shiny.
It does, doesn't it? Right?
Dave BNSF N scale says how true on shiny toy-like appearances. And Dave BNSF says that John Allen, a true pioneer in the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Kent S says to John Arthur's comment says stuff fades out pretty quick in the sun, especially before modern clean coats. Clear coats. That's what he corrected in the end in the second paragraph. It's absolutely right. I'm always amazed when I go to people's layouts or I'm invited to people's layouts and the building just sits right on the foam board or on the homoso and you can see the line. I'm like, doesn't shit in the building look like it's in the ground? And I have a building on my layout, the Brooklyn Lollipop Company, that tilts like this. It literally tilts 45 a little, like, and people come in. I had one guy come in to help to operate, and he looked at the building and he said, Bill, that building lists to the left. I said, I know, the foundation sucks there. There's a wall, there's an underground stream, and they've been trying to fix it for years.
In some ways, Bill, too, modeling damage like that, where you do have a listing building, or if you have like what John Allen was famous for, the sway back roofs on the box cars.
Yeah,
doing those successfully is really hard. You really have to kind of plan it out, and it's a lot more cutting and fitting than you can imagine. Because if you just use the straight up, even a board by board technique. The boards, it just looks like, oh, you just build it that way. You want it to look like it fell apart. That's the whole key. And,
yeah, right.
But
right.
you don't want it to be overdone too. And
exactly.
it's like weathering too. Less is more. Sometimes you put a coat of weathering on there, and it's like, well, this doesn't look much different. Well, the deal is with weathering is to be judicious with it and do a little bit of weathering. Not too much, even just to the point where you don't think it's enough, where you can even see it, and just put it aside for a little bit. And then when you come back, you can say, "Oh yeah, that looks pretty good now." Because now, like I said, the toy-like sheen is gone, or what have you.
Right, exactly. It's a Wigwag workshop says he says I feel I'm pretty decent at weathering wood kits. I just can't get that plastic brick structure to look good.
Well, there's a secret to that. Don't use plastic for brick. Use plaster. It's much better. But that's something we'll talk about in a later episode. That's something to think about. Don't be afraid of the downtown Deco kits.
Oh, I love downtown Deco.
Yeah, or not downtown. Is that the one?
Yeah, downtown.
Randy Pepcock.
Yeah, he does the plaster structures.
Plaster structures. Yeah, they're great, aren't they?
Yeah, I love them. Because if they break, all you do is wet them and stick them together.
That's right. Well, the best part too is that, first of all, what Randy's worked on is it really looks like ancient concrete and deteriorating brick off the get-go. And if it isn't deteriorated enough, you just get there with an X-Acto knife, start poking at it, and you
Yeah,
deteriorate it even more.
exactly right. Exactly right.
It's fascinating to do this.
I hear what you're saying on this, and I think all of us that are listening, on the broadcast tonight, I think it's a question of confidence and just going forth and attempting it. What I've come to learn in my journey on model railroading is one of uh, is if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. I've come to realize that the sun does come up the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife has dinner for me ready in the afternoon. I may be very frustrated and annoyed, but I learn from that and I go forward with that. And am I the greatest modeler of all times? Am I up there with the John Allens and the Mile Hales? Am I? No, far from it. But where I'm at, I'm happy and I'm learning more and more and more. And the best thing about learning more and more is always having that exchange of ideas with other modelers.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love going to other modelers' homes or having other modelers come to my house. You have that discussion, and you can, freelance back and forth. Even on the YouTube videos, you can give, ideas and stuff like that. So it's always like some of the stuff that I've done on the South Brooklyn Railroad, like my river scene. Like I had no idea what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people if I had an idea of what I was doing or what I wanted conceptually, my river would have not been centered the way it is. It would have been over to the left, and the bridges would have been like off kilted. But because I didn't know what I was doing, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, my wife came in afterwards and she said, "Hun, I didn't know you had it in you to do that." And I looked at it and I was like, "I didn't either, but heck,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it came out every time." What's his name? Dave BNSF N scale. I think you're talking about the plastic. Is some bricks can individually be painted slightly different shades. True. That does help. John
That's
Arthur.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
John
with
Arthur says I have my first downtown Deco kits, 3 of them, sitting right here. Excited to get going on them soon.
mhm. Well, definitely, you'll definitely want to tune in when we start talking about the plaster kits too. I mean, I think Randy does great instructions. I'll tell you when you see a page of instructions, even like a Campbell's kit or something like that, and it's all words, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like War and Peace. I can't read all this stuff, but
Right.
just slog on through it because there's a lot of good, especially Randy stuff. He gives you a lot of great ideas. Going back to the brick, right? What I like to do is, when you call out bricks, you pick 3 colors for bricks typically, right? You have like your base color, and then you have like a black and then either like a lighter red or an orangey type of color, and you paint with the 2 other colors. You paint your base coat on everything, and then with the 2 other coats, you randomly pick like 5 or 7 or what. You use the Fibonacci numbers. It's like any number in the Fibonacci sequence is fine.
Right.
3, 5, what's it, 8, 11, what have you. Just pick that many bricks because for some reason, right? Math and nature kind of go hand in hand. The
Yeah.
Fibonacci sequence is perfect, like for planting trees, right? They have like these the 3-tree rule. So if you don't plant a clump of trees, if you plant 1 tree or 2 trees together, it kind of looks contrived. But once you get to 3 or 5 or 8, then it looks more natural.
Right.
And the other math thing that not to bore you with math and everything
No,
else,
go ahead. Go ahead.
but the other thing to consider too is, and I do this for my figure clinic. I talk about the bell curve, right? And that's basically the whole point is that most of what you're going to build will be, in a height range. 75 to 87% of what you're going to build is going to be at a certain height. And then there's stuff that are going to be outliers. They're going to be a little bit higher and a little bit lower. And as you go out, there's like 95% and then 99%, that last 1%. That's like 2 or 3 standard deviations. And the further you get away from that mean, that middle of the bell curve, the less of those items that you have for the outliers, and the more you have to explain them.
Right.
Like for my figure clinic, I talk about different sized people, and most people are men are 6 feet, women are about 5'8", give or take.
Right.
And I go and I represent stuff like, all right, well, if you have a woman that's 5'3", that's more of an outlier. You probably only want to have maybe 1 or 2 of those versus 20 of the more 5'8" normal sized women. And then if you have somebody that's really short, like a 4.5 feet tall woman, you probably only want to have 1, unless you say, oh, well, there's a midget convention in town or something like that, right? And the same goes for like the biblical giants, because I with the and I should actually, if I had the slide next time I come on, I'll bring the slide where I do have this curve, and I talk about the biblical giants are like 18 feet high. If you have a biblical giant on your layout, well, you better have a story for them, and if there's 2 of them, you better have a real good story.
Right.
But that's the whole thing. If you look at the Fibonacci numbers as a guide to put stuff on the layout, and then you look at the bell curve as a way to explain stuff, and it's further from the mean, the more explaining you got to do, and the less of the craziness you have to do, because then you kind of regulate yourself and not get too crazy with it.
Yeah. Kent S says, I try and buy on the cheap buildings, freight cars at train shows to practice weathering on. Yeah, that's a very good. I've done that.
That is great. In fact, actually, one thing I was thinking too, going to the glue fingerprint, and maybe a challenge to everyone who's watching the broadcast. You go to the train show, and there's always a table underneath. There's always a box underneath the table somewhere where they have all these plastic buildings that are built up, and they have all the glue fingerprints in the world on them. And that would be a challenge for the viewers to say, hey, let me go and buy maybe 1 or 2 of those buildings there for maybe a couple bucks, drag them home, and figure out how I can save them.
Yeah. Randall Ellis says, I'm doing good if I can just replace the wheels and the couplers on my HO scale freight cars. I like that because I myself, Randall, I strive for mediocrity. And anything above that, it's a banner day, brother. It is a banner day. So I feel you, man. I feel you. Always strive for mediocrity, and anything above that, hey, you're a winner no matter what. Because you attempted it, you did it. Anything above that, hey, time for a roast beef hero.
That's right, or 2, man. You never have enough extra hot peppers.
Eric Hall's in the house. He says, I went the cheap route too and selected a short wife that was cheap. But I'll be here all weeks, folks. Don't forget to tip your waiters.
There you go.
But do you have any more slides or anything that you want to
I do have a bunch of pictures, and it's just random stuff, but we can kind of go through it, and we can kind of talk about what I've been up to. Let me go try to get that queued up here real quick.
John Benechek says, fear of failure makes us tries the fear of failure makes us not try things. What did John F. Kennedy say in 1962? Is that we go to space not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
That's right.
So that's why you got to keep that in mind. It's the worst that can happen,
Right. And you have Franklin Roosevelt saying the only thing to fear is fear itself.
There it is. And my favorite is, don't back up. Severe tire damage.
Oh gosh, yes, that's one to really pay attention.
Yeah, definitely. And what's the other one? Oh, if you want to have a good time, you have to have a good watch.
Yeah. And what's the other saying? Even a broke clock is right twice a day.
That's right.
And that goes back to modeling, because it seemed like with my modeling, especially because I was my own harshest critic. And it's like you were saying with your example, Bill, too. It's like when the wife came and saw it, it's like, oh, it looks really good. But before she came there and gave you that feedback, you're like, oh, well, this is wrong. I would do this differently. I would do
Oh
that
man.
differently. Oh, it's just not perfect, whatever. And we all, I think, have that
Right?
nagging little perfection and stuff we have to deal with.
Yeah, I was having a real big pity party. I was literally beating myself up until she walked
Hmm.
in. And I got pissed because I didn't invite you to my pity party.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see if these slides come up or not, or see how we do with these today. They're coming up.
Well, I do see a consider mounting the decoder in the layout instead of inside a vehicle.
Okay, well that's a good start, right? All right. So this slide here is kind of an interesting project I was working on, a micro layout. Now, instead of using a traditional um, train control system,
Mm-hmm.
I used what they call a Blue Horse decoder board. All right. Essentially, what the Blue Horse board is, um, it wires in just like a regular decoder, except that it doesn't use a command station. It's basically you hook up to the board with your phone using Bluetooth. So you can actually have the control systems on your phone, and it talks to the Bluetooth board. Now, the nice thing about the Blue Horse board is it has protection. It has short circuit protection on the gray and orange wire, which is the wire that usually gets mounted to the motor in a typical decoder installation. And what I've done in this picture here is kind of show you, and we'll take a little look further on because I have some pictures of the micro layout.
Okay.
Uh, so, and actually the Blue Horse board, which in terms of decoder, it's huge. All right, it's a huge decoder in terms of decoder size. But you can squeeze in an HO if you really work it. But I mounted it to the layout, so I have a power supply feeding the black and red wires, and I have the gray and orange going right to the track, and then I just put a regular DC locomotive on it, and I can control that regular DC locomotive with my phone, which is really kind of cool.
Oh, cool.
So the next one here, you want to hazard a guess as to this model here, Bill?
A cartoonish Titanic.
It's exactly right. That is a cartoonish Titanic. I thought that would be an interesting uh, model to build up in detail and put on one of my waterfront modules, just to give it a little bit more exciting, because excitement and feel, because you were able to recognize that model as the Titanic, because it has certain key features. It has the four funnels, and it just has that general huge proportions and such.
Right.
And since TTrack, you don't always have a lot of space, so you really have to think in terms of selective compression. And with selective compression, and this is kind of part of my journey as well. Before, it was like ultra realism. Everybody has to be ultra realism, but then you look at model building as a compromise. Everything you do is a compromise. The materials don't always scale, etc., etc. So you could go one of two ways. You either try to hide the fact that you're making a compromise, or you just go full bore and say, I'm making a compromise and I'm going to flaunt it. So this is a case where you do a shorty, you do a more cartoonish type flavor to it, but there's still enough detail there so the casual observer recognizes what you're going for. So you recognized it was the Titanic. You're spot on, and
I'm smart. I could have been the head of the family.
okay, yeah, definitely. All right. Now going back to the blue rail, and I'm sorry these aren't in any particular order. I didn't change the file names, but this is how I mounted that blue rail board underneath this micro layout. The micro layout is, I think it's about 12 inches by 15 inches, if I'm not mistaken. But I mounted there, put a little bit of a plastic shield on it, and just basically screwed it to the board, and then wired it to a barrier strip, and then from the barrier strip it went right to an external power pack and to the tracks.
Hmm.
Okay. All right, now this one here, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about this model? Now, I mean, if you were from Pennsylvania, you would say this looks like a Reading blue liner.
Right.
But you might have a different opinion of this. You might say this looks more like a New York subway.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty
It
much.
kind of has that feel. Right?
Yeah.
This
Trolley type.
right, exactly. What this is, it's called a Shorty Train. Okay, it's a series of kits from Japan, and they're basically static models, but you can actually buy the parts to make them actual working models in N scale. And the whole idea is they keep the proportions of the width and the height, and there's a fixed length on all the cars. So in real life, this car is I think it's a Series 51, if I'm not mistaken, and it would have 3 doors on it instead of 2. But this is like an exercise in selective compression, where
Right.
you're basically forced to pick and choose. What do? Do you go with 3 doors and you have really small windows, or do you just leave off the door? Uh, and that's the kind of decisions you have to make as a modeler in the best of situations. Even if you're going for realism, you don't always have the luxury of building it exactly. But you
True.
have to leave stuff off eventually.
Right.
This takes it to the next level. This, like I said, it's extreme. It's a celebration. But the other nice thing about this picture as well is kind of like the water scenery there too, and that's just done with paint. If you look underneath the bridge,
Right.
so you can get a lot of, especially with N scale, you can get a lot of depth in your scenery just by using different paints. Okay. Now this is, again, these are more shorty cars, and this one, it looks like that almost looks like a Christmas train to me, I'll tell you.
Right.
And then the other one's a snow plow, which is very unique. So you definitely have to have a good representation of your maintenance away crew.
Right.
Okay. This is a TTrack module too, and I think there are our show when we talked 2 weeks ago. We were talking about TTracks not having the opportunity to have more realistic scenery. This actually, if you take a hard look in the windows of the factory there on the bottom, there's actually little motorcycles in there. That's the Cosmopolitan Motorcycle Factory.
Oh, okay.
All right. I actually probably should have had more detail, because I do have lighting in that building. I just have to get that up and running. But we have 3 different types of building. We have the Cosmo Factory, which is made out of MDF. You have a more traditional Blair line laser cut wood kit, and up front you have the plastic Atlas train shed.
Okay.
The station.
Right.
And there's no reason why you can't mix and match different media in the same scenery. All right, now this one here is, again, we're using different mixed media. And for our frugal model railroaders, you'll see that basically 2 freight cars were recycled.
Right.
All right, so we have basically the N scale version of the old Revell Yardmaster kit.
Right.
Or my take on it anyway.
Right.
On the right hand side, the orange tank car.
Right.
There's a site called hoseeker.net. It's a great site because it has a lot of instructions for old model kits. It also has
What is that called again?
hoseeker.net. HO like HO scale and seeker.net. It's a great site. It has a wealth of different instructions scanned in there. And I basically found a Campbell kit in HO scale, the instructions for it, the plans for it. And I scaled it down to N scale. And that's basically scratch build with the exception of the tank. So that's my tank of that. Uh, in the middle, you'll see basically there's a little oil dealership type area that is a plastic kit. And the big factory building, believe it or not, is a paper kit.
Is it what?
Paper. It is
Paper. Okay.
It is just it's from Clever Models. They have some interesting kits. It's but what's really nice about it, especially in the distance, is that it has a lot of nice brick detail, and you can do a light weathering on it. You spray your dull coat on it. It's a great stand-in until it actually was the proof of concept. This module was basically the proof of concept for the previous model I showed you, okay, with the big factory building in the back. So this was my proof of concept. I obviously didn't have the Cosmopolitan Motorcycle Factory. I had this generic thing I mocked up.
Right.
But it worked out well enough that I just let's stay with it. So it was one of those happy experiments that just kept on giving. So
that's good. That's good. That's
wait a second. I'm going too fast here. All right, go back here. All right, so right here we're going to take a look at one of my waterfront modules.
Right.
And I saw in Japan, I saw the Atomics kit where they had these crazy swan boats. I thought to myself, I gotta use those. And so I grabbed a couple of those and put it next to the boat building. So this is a little, you got the track on one side, you got the wharf on the other side. And up front, you have little bicycles in N scale.
Yeah, I was going to say that looks pretty, and the rack to go with them.
And the rack, right? The rack was pretty simple. It's an HO scale ladder that I basically repurposed, and I just built the side frames for it, and then just drove the bikes in. All right, there's your classic Godzilla destroying Tokyo with a burnt out building from Atomics. This Godzilla actually is the right size where its tail looked like it really wiped the building out, so it kind of has a nice look for it.
Yeah.
This is the module going back to the Blue Rail board. This is my micro layout.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it has the blue rail board in it as well, and it I run DC trains, using my cell phone with the blue rail board in that configuration. And actually, if you look really careful back there, there's big black box, and then there's the jackery. So it's all battery powered, self-contained. I could actually go anywhere. I could go to like a picnic grove and run this thing if I really
Oh, cool.
But it's also great because if I go to a train show and they want to charge me $90 or so for a power drop, I'll just no, thank you, I don't need one. I'll just use my jackery and just run
it. Right.
I'll save myself $90.
Right.
But again, this is a work in progress, but it kind of gives you an idea. The whole concept was I had a piece of brass flex track, and I'm like, well, what can I do with this piece of brass flex track? So I just bent it into a circle. I'm like, all right, there you go, and that's how this whole concept was born. So it wasn't a big elaborate concept. It was just kind of like it flew. These are very interesting here. These guys. One of my friends came up and he handed these guys to me. He says, "Oh, can you use these?" I'm like, "Yeah, they look pretty interesting." If you look on the back, there's this big cutout for old school Christmas bulbs. So
Right.
my thought is that these were part of like a 1950s, 1960s type light string set that had different buildings as its theme. Instead of like the chili peppers or the stars or what have you.
Right. Right.
And it's just interesting how how detailed these little buildings are. It just I thought I was fascinating. So the lesson there is that sometimes your best modeling ideas don't come from the train shop. Yeah,
True.
you
True.
know,
Very true.
I guess that's one of the things I learned on my journey too. Is like, I don't just like look at the train shop. If you go to the hobby store, go to like the military modeler section, go over to the
Oh,
other side to check it all out.
that's a big thing with Ralph Renzetti,
Mhm.
aka the Mudfather. He's always like, guys, check out the military guys doing what they're doing because it can change your modeling perspectives.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, here's another close up of the micro layout, and with the different materials, we got some of your traditional ground foam just past the track line, and then more of the static grasses in the middle.
Right.
But again, it's all about mixing and matching. Just
It's
don't.
playing. It's playing.
Yeah, you don't stick to one technique. You
Right.
have to really just mix it up, get a lot of
Experiment.
different textures.
You, you got to think out of the box sometimes. Think
Mhm.
out. If it doesn't work, you put some of these. You know,
Exactly, exactly. Now there's another look too of the back end of the circle where I build up the little mound, and I have a little rock line on the other side, the back side. You can see the back of that billboard. I scratch built that billboard. I really just kind of I don't know. I just kind of went whole hog on that and just went really just like let's build this billboard out, make it kind of a lot of nice textures to that. All right, now shifting over to DCC installs, because like as a jack of all trade, I'm not just confined to doing scenery or running trains. I'm like fixing trains and putting decoders in them and such. Now this is a cautionary tale. This model here. This is an old AHM RS2, and I put Katie's on it and everything else, and I put a decoder in it. And this is there's the lesson here. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. All right. Now it runs okay, and it's kind of a novelty, but it's certainly not going to get run every day. It's not definitely not going to be my favorite locomotive ever. It was fun, but the nice thing that this shows too is how neat the wires are and everything else. As you do more decoder installs, uh, you basically build up the confidence to cut the wires shorter and have a lot neater install. When I first had this, first did this install, I had the wires all long and they're all over the place, and it's like a rat's nest. And now, that looks that's a pretty clear wire path. And I actually had these little plastic light stands I had, so it's basically the mechanisms can totally be removed. It doesn't have any attachment to the shell.
right. John Arthur says putting lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, right?
That's well, exactly. But you know what? It took me getting out the lipstick to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to
Sometimes
go
you just
through it.
got to break out the lipstick, right? This is actually a Proto 2000 BL2, which basically is the same as like an F3 kind of shell. This is a discrete install where I just basically use the decoder and the keep alive and speaker. So this is all sound. And then this one here is the same model. It's another BL2, but this time instead of using the discrete components, I used the motherboard install.
Okay.
And what's nice about the motherboard, because the Aether motors, they have the two big clips that go on top of the motor. This motherboard has that clip too, so it sits right on top of the motherboard, and it gets power from one side, so you only have to solder to the other side there. And pretty much it's self-contained, so it's a really nice, clean install. Not too much soldering going on there. I think the one thing I did do is that LED that's hanging out there, I think it's a little bit short. I think it ends up going in the cab instead of under the nose. So I probably have to extend that out. But, you know, it looks pretty good right now, I mean, in terms of the install. Now, we talked a little bit about this, John Allen. John Allen had like I said, a sense of humor, and he introduced some of the whimsical elements into model railroading, especially in his photography. And he had the Stegosaurus. It was G&D number 13. It was called Big Emma. And this is kind of my take on Big Emma after the fire in California, and she got sold to Mexico, and now she's retired in some tropical paradise, except that they had to strip her skin off to get all the asbestos out of her. So right now she's sitting there without skin.
Right.
So it's just like, it's just like the steam locomotives. How many steam locomotives do you see right now that don't have any skin on them?
Yeah.
This is interesting too, and this is kind of an inspirational shot, and just kind of let basically there's so much prototype, so many different prototypes out there in the world that are just so interesting. These are in Germany. There's a little bit of there's like like a 10 kilometer stretch on the Rhine where they have all these castles. They have like 70 castles on this 10 kilometer stretch. And they have what I would call bonus castles, which are basically tunnel portals. They're just dressed up to look like castles to fit into the environment.
Right.
And this is just one of them. And there's about, I think on that stretch, there's 11 tunnels. So that would be about 22 portals. There's like 22 portals.
It's good photograph to use for reference.
Oh, it's a great photograph for reference. And just to do, I mean, if I were to model this from scratch, I would say maybe foam would be the way I would go with it, to use like some pink foam and one of those like a tippy or Foam Factory cutting tools to do the cutout work. Right. But it certainly gives you you basically have a lot of options with this too.
Yeah.
Right, now here's the TTrack layout again. Once again on the dining room table, and I think we saw some of this layout there. There's if you look at the background, there's Nano Block Tokyo, which is a just Nano Blocks theme. So you can run the gamut from toy-like to prototypical scenery. Most of my modules are more serious, and they also feature static grasses and stuff like that. So I try to make the scenery as realistic. Now, as the counterpoint to this realistic scenery, I run the Shorty Trains too, which are basically they're more cartoonish, more toy-like.
Right.
And I kind of like the way that plays, where you have like the cartoonish stuff running through the ultra scenery. And some people like it going the other way too. They like to have real trains go through cartoonish scenery. There's all different places. But with TTrack, what's nice is it doesn't really matter what you run, because I can have ultra realistic trains run on that, even if I don't own any trains, because I'll just take it, get together with some friend or club or somebody else has TTrack model, and they'll run his trains, and they'll be more realistic, and we can get some good pictures and such.
Right.
So, I mean, that just gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more options. Here's another look at it. There's Big Emma again, and there's some of the Gordian defeated cars there that we managed to save for restoration. Yeah, Big Emma's in the restoration yard. So even though she doesn't have any skin on her, it's a hopeful story that eventually she'll get some skin back and back in the game.
Okay.
There's another look at her. Yeah, I just I was at the dollar store and I saw these basically dinosaur bones, essentially dinosaur skeletons at the dollar store. I was like, dude, I have to get those. And then it's like, one's a Stegosaurus. Oh my God, that's John Allen's Big Emma on my rip track right there. That was a major win. There's a look at the swan boats again.
Right.
And with that swan boats, you have which kind of gives that a little bit of whimsy, but then you have like the house on the dock, that kind of thing going on over there too. That looks pretty nice. That's actually a Bar Mills kit. It's interesting though that you see how that's white and green. That's
Right.
my MO. It's like when I do a kit, they usually end up being like some flavor of cream and green, and I think to myself, I either have to get to the point where I change the color scheme up, or I have to get somebody else to build some models for me. That's just the bottom line. It's like,
Yeah.
I play with this idea. It's like, all right, I could say, hey, Big Bill, you know what? I need this building here, and it's like a 4x4 inch space. Can you just build something for me?
Right. Right.
And then whatever you build, you just take it wholesale and you just plop it down. And it's like, all right, because in real life, right, you don't control what you do in your neighbor's house, right? Your neighbor does whatever it does, right?
True, very true.
So if it annoys the heck out of you, right? If that's real life. It's a slice of life. It's actually more accurate than you building all the buildings yourself, and they're all cream and green, and it looks like some sort of some sort of company town or something.
Company town, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the Racket Lake car slip right there. That's that's an N-scale architect kit, and actually it's actually pretty nice. I like N-scale architect. They do some nice work. It's very fine parts. They're very delicate until but it's interesting because they're very delicate by themselves, but once you build it together, they become really strong. And this is back in Germany. This is another one of those castle portals.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's all different. So yeah, of the 11 portals, the portals are, there's 11 different sets. Right, here's another one. I just find this fascinating. They build these that just it just makes me want to build a module like that. And don't get me started with windmills. I have to do a windmill module.
Oh,
too.
Okay, I won't.
But it's like everything else, right? It's if it keeps you interested and you're building. That's the whole key. You got to keep building.
You're continuing to build and to experiment with this and with and with the modular kits and not getting overwhelmed, because if you make a mistake, you can go back, either take it apart or redo it or refurbish it, whatever it is that you want to do, and that's the beauty of this thing. That's the beauty, So this was good, Mike. This was good.
Yeah. I have tons of more pictures to do, but I don't want to monopolize everybody's time. This is what I had picked out, just kind of some random stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely want to get more of the plastic kits. I do have a bunch in the basement. I have a bunch of old Plasticville.
Yeah.
That I can pick up.
Yeah. Randall Ellis says it's been a fun show, Big Bill. Enjoyed it, but it's time for me to get some sleep. Take care, all. Take care.
Yeah, I think we're going a little long, aren't we, dude?
No, that's quite.
We're good. All right.
But I think this was a very good show. I think it was a show worth doing. And I know that when we come back in September, we have we have three more to do
Mhm.
on bursting the plastic bubble. The next show in September would be the laser cut wood kits or craftsman kits, or how creative do you feel about it? And
Mhm.
I think this is like, again, it's a journey that you've taken, and I think most of us have taking it in some direction or not, but it's also giving permission, I think, to those that want to do something but are intimidated, like you said, and nothing against the publications that are out there or shows that are out there. It has nothing to do with that, but people sometimes feel they have to have the big layout, where actually you're introducing them to a different concept and a different way of approaching the hobby.
Absolutely. I think people are much happier. Especially train shows. I mean, if the trains aren't running, nobody's going to look at your layout. That's just the
Now
bottom line with the
that's
train
the
show.
truth. That's the truth.
And in your basement, it's the same way. If the trains are running, your whole mood is a lot different. You're a lot
Mhm.
happier.
Mhm.
Uh, Things are just going well, and getting to the point where you can run trains is the whole idea of Joe Fugate's Toma concept. It's something that you can do with TTrack, especially if you don't have the space or the micro layouts.
Right, exactly.
And we have so many options as model railroaders too, and some of them don't really cost us that much money. Like, if you go to the hoseeker.net and you look at those plans, and it's like, oh
Hmm.
wow, there's so many interesting buildings that you can scale down the different scales if you're an N.
Hmm.
Just don't be scared off by HO being in this name. It's not just HO. Even O scalers, they can
No,
scale
yeah,
up, right? You know.
absolutely correct. I think this is uh excuse me for just John, Mike.
Hmm?
John Author says, "There's that hula girl again." What?
No, no. What hula girl?
What hula girl, John? What? John, come on now.
Somebody's hitting the tequila early.
Oof, Johnny boy, take it easy there, brother. Anyway, all right, John, you're right. It is a hula girl right there. That's Hula Annie right there. It's our mascot here at the South Brooklyn Railroad. You were right, John. You win. Mike, thank you so much for being on. We're looking forward to this continuing series that we'll be holding in back in September. And in the meantime, tomorrow night, Johnny's Train Talk show is back on at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you guys can come on down to John's Train Talk show. Mosey on down to the general store there, pull up a chair, pull out a soda pop, and enjoy talking to Johnny on Johnny's Train Talk show. If you have a video camera and good internet, you can get on with John as well. Bring and brag anything that you're working on, and any questions that you might have, please feel free to join in and even ask on the Q&A. And also, we have Discord. That's a new social platform that we have on MRL. It's for everybody in the model railroading community. And there it is right there on Q, Discord chat. You can go on after hours, usually on from 10 o'clock until the wee hours of the morning, or until you say it's time for me to go to bed. And other thing, I will be on May 18th on Who Is Big Bill Talking To. I'll be having Jim Kay. He was featured on Mr. Baronic's What Is the Track Planner Working On? He was the gentleman from Verizon, the retired employee from Verizon, with that beautiful, beautiful wiring diagram that we saw and that great looking N scale layout. He's going to be my guest on May 18th. He's looking forward. We talked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours yesterday on the phone. Nice guy, very knowledgeable, and really has a lot of info and everything. So we'll be seeing him now. That this is good on Who's Big Bill Talking To, because this is a show we saw with Mr. Baronic, Bill Baronic, the track planner, and here we're going to see the actual recipient of the track plan that will be explaining it and what he wanted, how it came out, and what his thoughts are on it. So with that said, you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to give you the tip of the night. Mike, what do you think about this tip? How many of us have ordered food from the outside, especially during the pandemic, right?
All the time, man.
Right. So what happens is they send them in these with these little tops on top of this thing. You keep these things, man. These are good for paint, glue. You can see I use some glue. These things are, and you're gonna order the food and you get like 6 or 7. You hold them in, wash them up, and put them in. Put them in your land. I use these for everything.
That's absolutely. I mean, even if you get like a soda in a plastic cup, say plastic cup, that's good for like doing paint, do washes too. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
if you use like water-based paints, right? You use the craft paints.
Anything.
Just
These are,
clean all your paintbrushes in the same thing, and then after about 3 weeks, you got this wonderful wash that's multicolored.
yeah,
It's
it's all
great
good.
on rocks or whatever. Yeah.
So you guys, out there, you be well, you be safe, and you be blessed. And we will see you guys on the radio. Mike Dettinger, thank you again. John Mitchell, thank
Yep.
you again for a great job in producing, directing, and holding on to the camera and keeping us online. Take care and God bless, guys. Like I said, we'll see you on the radio. Bye-bye.